All right. So, Vicki, my gosh, the last time I saw you was at the Printers Row Book Fair, which was, let's just say, interesting with a trickle of people. I mean, what
It
do you
was
think
a
happened
year
there?
ago. Oh, well, it was COVID. They were down. They only had half as many booths, and they arranged the booths you know, in ways that cut off a lot of areas. And my daughter was with me, and my daughter went walking all over the place and said, "Oh, there's hardly anyone here."
Yeah.
And what did we sell? I don't know, 5 to 10 books each. I mean, it just wasn't that much. It was
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah. And then your book, well, there are a lot of reasons why I want to talk to you, but first of all, it's this book, Close Encounters of the Chicago Kind, which it was so good. And when I first read it, I thought I was expecting some insight, like, you know, how you read memoirs and people sort of offer you some insight about what they've learned. I'm like, wait, no, she's not offering that. It's literally it's just literally encounters in Chicago
That's
and
right.
its descriptions. And actually, in your introduction, you said that during these times, it's nice to read about and write about actually encountering people, because I haven't really encountered a lot of people since COVID hit. And the more I read, I thought, gosh, this is so good. And you really capture Chicago. I mean, what's your Chicago background?
I was born here. I was born in the Chicago area. I was raised on the southwest side,
Oh,
and I
where?
went
Where on the Southwest side?
what is now called it's the Oak Lawn and Burbank area. So I was born in Burbank. I was born in Stickney Township, and now it's Burbank.
Okay.
For a while, it was Oak Lawn, but it's definitely that southwest side. Um, and in fact, you know that I'm from the south side because I don't pronounce the H in south. I don't
Ooh,
say south side.
right.
I'm from the south side.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, I've been well, for many years, 15 years, I've been teaching or now I'm subbing at Daly College at
Oh yeah,
76 in
sure.
Pulaski.
Right.
So I'm very familiar with that area. And there's a Starbucks I go to in Oak Lawn near the metro station, or that I used to go to before I taught. But so oh my gosh. So like so you've been in Chicago. Have you lived in Chicago your entire life?
Well, I've tried to go elsewhere. Like I lived in LaSalle, which is about, I don't know, what is it, maybe 90 miles or so from here, or so. I lived in LaSalle. I worked for the News Tribune, which is a wonderful little newspaper there. And after 2.5 years, I moved up to Waukegan. And I worked there for about 4.5 years. Again, a fabulous newspaper, the New Sun. Really happy to have had those experiences. I did. I did interview. I interviewed in Toronto. I interviewed in Milwaukee. I interviewed in Boston. Um, I interviewed in San Francisco, and I always ended up not getting the job, but being told, if just give it a couple more years. And I thought after a while, I don't want to leave Chicago. I like Chicago. So I got a job at the American Bar Association as an editor, as a writer first at the ABA Journal, and then as an editor. And I kept thinking, work it for a year or two, you know. But I was there for 18 years.
Wow.
It was like,
Was
it
that
was
in River North? Was that the
like,
one in River North? Were they in River North back then?
no, when I first started, they were at Wacker and Monroe, and then it was still on Monroe, but closer to Dearborn. Then it was 750 North Lakeshore. Um, but again, those are the jobs where you make friends for life. Um, and I don't, and it's interesting. And I don't know what, Margaret, what your feeling is about this, but I think people today move really quickly. They work for a place for a year, maybe two, maybe 6 months, and so they don't have lifelong friends from their work experiences. I do. I have friends going back to those early days of LaSalle.
Yeah, you do talk about LaSalle. I'll show your book again. This is such a good book, seriously. And first of all, what's good about this book is you don't have to sit down and commit yourself to it. You can
No,
read snippets. That's what I did. That's exactly what I did. I would just read it when I had free time. And but okay, I should say it's actually called Close Encounters of the Chicago Kind, because there's going to be an audio podcast as well. But you did talk about LaSalle briefly, and you said, okay, first, what was it like to live in LaSalle? It's a small town.
it's a small town. It was fine. I was 22. I turned 22 when I was in LaSalle. And I stayed there until I was, just before I hit 20. It's before I hit 24. I was 21 when I was there. I was 24, almost 24 when I left. And you know what? As much as I loved the people that I worked with, LaSalle and towns like that are perfect if you're about 55 years old and you want that last 10 years of your work to be at a really good publication or a really good job. And you're going to work it for 10 years and then you're going to retire. But that was not what I wanted. And as wonderful as the job was and the people I knew I needed to get out. Then I ended up in Waukegan.
What was it like to work in newspapers back then?
Oh, little did I know that I would be at the tail end of the history of daily newspapers and working in a newsroom and getting assignments and going out and doing investigative reporting, crime reporting, shootings and city council meetings. And I mean, all of that was done. And I loved every second of that. I really did. And I would not have given that up for anything. But as the more I moved around, I worked for Newsweek magazine as a correspondent for about 12 years. I worked at the American Bar Association as an editor. It was always the craft of writing and editing and honing your writing, and interviewing people and learning. When you read other people's interviews and you think, oh, I should have asked that question, you learn. You ask it the next interview you do, and you keep evolving your skills. But now, I mean, people have asked me, should I go into journalism? The number one answer is yes. We need journalists. We need people who will ferret out the truth and report that. The question is, where are you going to work?
Well, does that newspaper still exist, the one in LaSalle?
The two papers still exist, but they're nowhere near the staff or the ability that I had. To be able to spend time working on an investigation, that doesn't exist any longer. Think of the last investigative journalism piece that you saw.
Well,
it's been a while.
I mean, they're out there. I mean, there's so many outlets right now, but I can't even, I don't know. There are also books written. I mean, now people are writing books, so they might work in the media and then.
No, that's right. But that daily journalism that, so what I think about is when young journalists ask the question, what else should I be looking at? And their sources say, well, you want a good story, you should look at this. And that tends to be how things get reported, that they hear about it and they have the opportunity to research that. But we were, oh my goodness, the staffs that I was on, we did a lot of different stuff. I just don't see that now. I just don't.
Well, I always think about investigative journalism being Spotlight. I mean, they totally blew the cover off the. So
right.
And they also a movie came out. Everybody should see that, Spotlight. It's so
1,000% yes. I saw it just recently. I decided I had nothing to do one night, which was really rare. And I was clicking around and Spotlight was on Netflix or something. And man, is that a good movie. And it tears at your heart because it's all about the pre-sexual abuse and it brings all of that back.
And at the end they have that list of all the places.
All the priests, all the places that the priests who sexually abused were discovered. What's interesting is my son and I went and saw that at a screening. I get invited to screenings because I do movie reviews every once in a while. Like today, I was actually on the Archdiocese radio station, and I was reviewing some movies.
Is that 950 or something?
Yeah, that's Relevant Radio, but they are they're at 720, I think. It's Catholic Chicago, and they do a YouTube channel as well. But my son Michael, came with me to a screening, and when that movie ended, really, he turned to me and said, "That's the best picture of the year."
Oh,
and I said, "Yeah, that's going to win."
Oh, so
you just knew it. Yes.
So when I think of investigative, I think of that. So I'm trying to think of something else. Yeah. But I mean, when you back then though, when you were working in journalism, did you have a feeling things were changing or not?
No, no, not like when when advertising started to change, you saw it. I worked for the Reader for a lot. I did a lot of my articles were in the Reader. The Reader used to be 4 parts. It was the main first part. It was then the music and the listings. Then it was, I don't know, maybe sports or something like that. And then it was the fourth part was always the advertising, the ads. But once Craigslist started, and you started to see that Craigslist free, well, for the most part, was biting into that ad revenue. You started to see newspapers shrinking, and when that happened, newspapers failed to do the smart thing, and that was to charge for their content. And instead, it took years. People were giving. You could just go on the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and you could get all that content for free. And it took a really long time, years, for them to say, "Oh no, we're charging. We'll give you 5 articles for free. If you like it, you got to pay." By then, the damage was done.
Well, it's interesting because I interviewed somebody else and they said that they think it's a mistake to charge, but I think they should have, because I remember the beginning of the internet and I was wondering myself, like, wait a second, what are they doing?
Yeah, everything was free. And no, you have to charge a little something. Otherwise, how are they going to continue? They have to pay their people.
Well,
You know?
some people say, it can be donation and so forth, sort of like PBS model, but
No,
they're
not going to
very
happen.
hard.
That model works if you have sources from outside. If you have any kind of outside funding, a lot of the papers don't. No,
So
they're
when the
they're
yeah. So when the
the,
internet, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, no. I was going to say they are for profit. The newspapers are not for profit unless you do the Reader. The Reader is now not for profit. You want to give money to the Reader? Great. You want to give money to the New York Times?
Yeah,
They're selling their content.
right. And also, once if you have access to, if you, because I subscribe to the New York Times, you can go into their archives. It's really incredible. So you can do a search from like the 19th century, 1971, anytime. You can do a search for a word or a topic, and all this stuff is going to come up. So it's like you have a library. It's really incredible.
Right? Not the 19th century, the 20th century.
Right, but no, but 19th century too. Didn't they? I think didn't they start in the night? You can go way back in the New York Times. It's really
Oh,
incredible.
yeah, maybe the New York Times. Yeah.
Yeah. But so when you were working and you said you met these people who became your lifelong friends, how did you maintain those relationships? Because people change.
Well, yes, people change. So maybe it isn't every single person on the staff, but when I was in LaSalle, I am still very close to at least 2 of those people. Now, some of the people have died because they were our older editors, and they're gone. But there was a whole core of us who were in our 20s, and at least 2 or 3 of us have stayed in touch. Um, and I've seen them. I've gone to visit. They've come to Chicago, and I've seen them in Chicago. That's LaSalle. Waukegan, those people are my friends every day. I mean, I can pick up the phone and talk to a number of people who I worked with in Waukegan. And the ABA, those are my lifelong friends too. We have dinners, we stay in touch. But you can't just, you have to work it. Having a friendship and being friends with somebody isn't just, oh, I'll pick up the phone a year from now. I mean, you have to call. You have to
Yeah,
share your life.
yeah, because this is very interesting because I really like people a lot, but reading your book and then getting to know you and reading all your stuff, I mean, in general, and then you're also a theater performer and so forth and producer. Um, you have really a knack of having tons of friends. And what I notice is I notice that people get into their little slot, especially when they have kids,
Hmm,
and it's hard to keep in touch with them. But and you raised 3 kids.
I
So
did.
how did you maintain such an active social life and everything with raising kids?
Well, my friends had kids at the same time. Like I said, we were all largely the same age. So we all started having our kids. And then it was easy to have birthday parties. And, when you have a birthday party for your kids, you're basically in the back having coffee, talking to the other moms and dads and, saying, hey, what are you doing these days? And, let's get a babysitter and we'll go to a movie or whatever. You make other adult plans. But many, many times those kids are are the connecting tissue that keeps a friendship going.
And also what's interesting about this book, Close Encounters of a Chicago Kind, I say of a Chicago Kind, is that I cannot get over how curious you are about the world around you. Have you always been like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was the family news source. I had my little black transistor radio, and I would listen to it, and I was always revealing news of the day. Um, and I've always loved news, and I've loved it. I've had a curiosity about people. Um, and my mother used to tell me that I would talk to anybody, to the point that sometimes she thought, I'm going to teach her a lesson. I'm going to walk away. And she would walk away. I just kept talking because I was comfortable with whoever I was talking to. Um, I also have a knack of seeing something develop and thinking to myself, just stand here, just wait and see if this is going to be an interesting little moment. And most of the times it is. And then I try to remember it and capture it really fast.
Yeah, because it comes out in your book, because yeah, that's what's so interesting about your book, because I've lived in the city for many years and I don't think I've noticed so much, or I haven't gotten into conversations with so many people, and you'll be in any kind of situation and there's always a story coming forth.
There's often a story. Now, it doesn't happen every time, but you have to be open to it. And when it happens, you have to say to yourself, this is a good story. This is an interesting person. This is an encounter that's worth capturing and remembering. And I might have an envelope in the car that I immediately go and start writing little bits of information on that envelope. And then when I get home, I try to write it down right away.
Well, did you know you wanted to make a book out of it? All of your observations?
No. I just like posting on Facebook. Part of it was just to get people to comment. So you say, how do you stay friends? A lot of what I like to do is to post something and then let people comment. Not all of my friends on Facebook are friends with each other, but it's interesting to see the variety of comments that I'll get on a particular post. And then I know that people have said, I like you, let's have coffee. You know, I thought I know you through Vicki, but you know, maybe we could become friends. So I know that has happened, which is cool.
Now it's interesting because I know somebody also, she is from the city, from the Southwest side in the city. And then she moved to the suburbs when she was older. I mean, but like when she was older, she was married, she got married. And she's sort of like you in that she always connects with people. And now I'm wondering, is this a Southwest side thing or South side? But I just think it's like old school to be so connected to people, especially today, because it seems like people are in their own little slots. But what do you think about that?
Well, don't forget, the South Side, as much as it's home, didn't offer a lot. We lived in ranch style homes. We talked to our neighbors on our block. I delivered newspapers when I was like 9 years old until I was about 14. I got to know the neighbors in my immediate area within an 8-block area, 10-block area. I knew the kids I went to school with. I knew their siblings. But if we wanted to do anything, we had to pretty much drive into the city. And so when you started getting to talk to people and find them interesting, it was a relief. Like, oh my goodness, there's other things going on in the world. You know, I grew up in a really lily white area. I did not see Black people until I was, I'm going to say, well, no, so I was actually like 5 or 6 years old because my father worked at East Texas Motor Freight Lines, and he was their union. He was the head of the union committee, and all those guys loved my dad. And my dad would take me to East Texas Motor Freight Lines if he had a special project that came up. And my dad had a mechanical mind. He was an amazing engineering mind. And there was a guy, a Black man named Perry. And I loved Perry. I loved him because he talked to me and they'd put me on that flatbed and roll me around and just ask me about my life. Somebody pays attention to you, that person is really special, because they're not just talking about themselves. They want to know what you are like. And I just loved Perry. And, it is true. When you're young, color means nothing, means nothing. It wasn't until I started to get older and I heard these nasty comments people would make about people who are Black. And I thought, oh, Perry's Black? And I love Perry. So how bad can he be? So it was a very eye-opening experience to me to see and learn racism. And again, I grew up in a really lily white neighborhood. And then to start going into the core of the city. My aunts, two of my aunts lived at like near 47th and Ashland, which was a real Mexican American neighborhood at that time. And then then your life starts to expand. You're like, Mexican food. Oh my God, this is nirvana. And people became really interesting to me to watch people. But that's really, it was getting into different neighborhoods and getting to know people, and being having an open mind, really.
Yeah, but also it's also the technology that's changed, because I was going to ask you, what did you think when the internet came around? Because, you were so connected to people and talking to people and meeting up with people, etc. And then the technology changed. So what did you think? Do you remember when it was changing?
Of course, sure. I wrote the show Late Nite Catechism by going to the library and going to Rizzoli's and other bookstores and buying books and reading books and highlighting and researching. There was no Google. There was no internet in 1993 when I was writing that show. And yeah, you had to go to look up microfiche and microfilm and read, which was really interesting. When I did pieces for the Reader, I did a lot of research like that. So when Google came, I don't know if you remember this, Google was kind of silly. People put silly things up there. And you could almost not believe what people were posting, because there didn't seem to be anyone policing that information until Wikipedia, came around. And then you're like, well, maybe these people at Wikipedia are actually doing some fact checking, because I came from a fact checking background. Even to this day, you can tell me something and I'll go, I got to look that up.
Right. Well, that's also journalists, because that's saying, if your mother says she loves you, check it out.
Check it out. Right.
So, but in terms of technology, though, see, what's very interesting about this book, okay, that you wrote, is that it's so much about human interaction and small human interaction. It's not like, oh, I went to this really cool event in Lincoln Park and I met these really cool people. No. It's like daily. And I really think that with technology, maybe that those kinds of things have changed. I mean, do you think it's more possible today to?
Well, you just have to get out there. But yes, I know what you're saying. And I agree that if you just rely on staying home and going online. I mean, going online is fabulous. Oh my God, you can watch a clip from anything you want. Name some obscure show or movie or something, and you'll find a clip of it. And that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, you have not nourished yourself in any way. You haven't met anybody. You haven't really talked to anybody. And so technology is great. It's great for research, as long as you don't accept everything that you find. But in terms of actually meeting people, no, you have to get out there. You do, and you have to keep your eyes open. That's the other thing. And not be afraid to talk to people. The other day, I saw this guy walking a dog, and the dog was this little tiny dog, but he was really pulling this man. And I said, oh, I see you got your guard dog with you, as a joke, And the guy looked at me like, and I thought, oh no. And man, he has not talked to somebody in a long time Yeah, where other people might stop and say, "Oh yeah, I take this dog out," and then you start a conversation.
Mhm.
So yeah, and because I start conversations, I tend to know a lot of people, and I know a lot because I read a lot, so I can have a conversation with almost anybody. Um, so
And then about your Bob Collins book, how did
yes,
you come to write that?
well, my friend Adrian Drell, who was working at the Sun Times at the time, contacted me about helping about being a part and helping her find authors for their 20th century um, uh, collection. So I took the year 1953, which was the year that the polio vaccine was discovered, and and Playboy and some other things happened in 1953, and I put her in touch with a whole bunch of other people, and so I was pretty actively involved in that book. She's definitely 1,000% the editor, the creator, everything. I was just helping her a little bit, and but I got to know the publisher and the representative from the publisher house. And one day he just approached me, he called me and said, "Would you? I mean, I like you. I like how you think. I like how you write. Would you like to do this book on Bob Collins?" And I thought, in a heartbeat, yeah,
Wow. Did
yeah.
you
I'll
know
do this on
him?
Bob
Did you
Collins.
know him?
I knew him only in that I would see him at different functions, events, um, and I liked him a lot. He was always all again a people person, somebody you could really identify with. Um, but when I got that assignment, I thought he was such a people person. The way to tell that story was through the people who came into touch in touch with him. And so I went to his childhood, and I drove up to Milwaukee several times and interviewed the guys that he worked with up there, um, and in Chicago. And I found viewers. I went on different sites where people had made comments about, oh, I really miss Bobby. And then I would just contact them. I'd hunt them down and call and say, hi, I'm doing a book. Would you like to talk to me? And I put together about 100 different interviews. Um, and I thought that was a good way of telling his story because he had such an impact on people.
Yeah. So what do you think made him so special? You said he was interested in people, but what?
Well, first of all, he had a great voice. He had a great morning radio voice. He wasn't shrill. He was very comforting. He was funny. He was never sarcastic. You always got the sense like he was your neighbor and you literally were having a cup of coffee with him. And I think people appreciated that. He had a great sense of humor. Um, and it was very easy to get people to talk about him. He was very well loved.
And so basically, did you intend for the book to be more of like a oral history kind of thing, or?
Yeah, that's how I envisioned it. They let me decide how to tell that story, and I could have just written it like a straight biography, um, but I thought it was more interesting to do it as an oral history. Let other people tell the story of Bob Collins.
And have you ever met Studs Terkel?
Oh yeah, Studs was a friend of mine. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, because what you're doing reminds me of Studs Terkel. So what did he help inspire you, or?
Oh, I've loved Stud's writing for a long time. And then when I got a chance to meet him, which was a long time ago, probably 30 years ago, yeah, he's just marvelous. Studs is marvelous. People I know who work in radio told me a great story. So he was on a radio show, and they'd given him a half an hour, 30 minutes, and he started talking. They were interviewing him. He started talking, and then he wandered around. Oh, his mind went over to this tangent, and then he went over to this tangent, and they were thinking, "Oh my God, how are we going to end this?" And all of a sudden, Studs brought it all back around,
Wow.
and it was like 29 minutes and 30 seconds. Whoomp. And they said it was watching the most brilliant master. And I thought, yeah, that's right. That's what Studs was. Um, he was a great interview, intensely curious about people. Yeah, I really liked Studs. I thought he was great.
Yeah, because you remind me of the kinds of things that he did. He was into talking just to regular people and so forth.
Yeah, look at Working. Look at one of his first books. It was all stories about people, and yes, he, letting people tell their stories. I know that when my father died, which was in 1992, I was pregnant with my daughter, and she was born 2 weeks after he died. And and Studs was working on that book about death, and he asked me about my father's death, and we talked at length about that. And he said to me, "I'm going to call you. I'm going to interview you for the book." And I said, "Okay, that'd be great." He never did. He interviewed all sorts of other people, and then he ran into me one time, and he went, "I never interviewed you." I said, "It's okay. You had a lot of material, Studs."
A lot. And I'm sure there's a lot of material he didn't even include.
Right, exactly.
So how did you start writing Late Nite Catechism? And by the way, I walked down Lincoln 2 days ago, and I saw that you're working on something else in that theater. I often,
Yes.
there are a lot of things you're working on, but I've seen your picture connected to that theater in Lincoln Park.
Right, exactly. I have a new show there called Are You Smarter Than Your Eighth Grade Nun? And it is a game show, because during the pandemic, we were desperately trying anything to get outside, right? And I wasn't going shopping. I didn't go shopping for a year. I did all my shopping on Instacart. Nobody went. We didn't go to a restaurant. You didn't go out, nothing. People were dying. Friends of mine were dying of COVID. And so I ended up watching TV, and I would watch that stupid game show network, which I kind of fell in love with, because it brings you all back to, oh my God, don't look at the game, look at the clothing.
Yeah.
Look at what the women are wearing. Look at the Nehru jackets. Look at the big ties or the skinny ties or whatever. And I just started to fall in love with it all over again. And then it hit me. I thought, a game show. I could create a game show. Game shows are not that hard. And so I thought I would love to do Your Eighth Grade Nun. Are You Smarter Than Your Eighth Grade Nun? And it just clicked. So the idea clicked, and it took a bit of revising. I mean, in addition to writing this book in 2020, I was working on that play. And then I did it for a park district. They were having an event, and I did it in 2021. And I did it for a group that came to the greenhouse. And the whole time I thought, is this a show? Is it? But then it just worked out. And now we do it every weekend, at least through the end of August. We're doing it at the greenhouse.
It's called the greenhouse. Yeah. And then when I was on Lincoln and I was walking near the theater, there were a couple people and they were talking about it. They looked at the sign and they said, "Oh my gosh, that looks really fun. We should do that. We need to do something fun." I felt like saying, "I know the person who created that," but I didn't say anything. I just listened and moved on. I was going to text you, but so it's pretty cool. But so people are responding to it well?
It took a couple weeks. By the third week, we could start to see the numbers coming, that people were finally like, oh, and then people were recommending it. And now, like last weekend, we had a lot of walk up, which was good. I still think I don't think it's COVID any longer. I got hired out at Sun City at the Del Webb retirement home in Huntley, Illinois. And they actually fit 400 chairs in the room. And then the police department or the fire department made them come and take 15 out. So they were at about 385. And it was packed, mostly seniors. And I thought to myself, well, they're not afraid of going out. And I was down in Oak Forest, and there were about 250 people. I was at a coffee house in Oak Lawn, and I think their legal capacity was 40, and they shoved about 75 people in there. And that made me realize, of course, it's not COVID. People are afraid of coming into the city of Chicago. And that's a shame. It's such a great city. And yeah, there's crime here. Yes, never going to deny that. But I don't think it should keep people away. There's so many great things in this city.
Yes, what's interesting about you is that you didn't move out of the city. You weren't like, oh, I've hit a certain age. I'm going to move to the suburbs. Why have you stayed in the city all this time?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because I raised my three kids here. We live in a condo that is blocks away from Lincoln Park, the north end of Lincoln Park. Um, I would say to my friends, why should I live in the suburbs when we can hop on the bus? We hop on the 146 and get to the Field Museum in 20, 30 minutes. Um, we can ride our bikes in Lincoln Park and stop and have an ice cream at Diversey Harbor. I mean, we can do the most wonderful things in this city that the city has to offer. Why would I want to move out to Schaumburg? Nothing wrong with Schaumburg. Sure, Schaumburg's fine. But why would I want to move my kids out there when
Well,
what they have here is so much more?
well, I think it's because in the suburbs it's quieter, and I mean, some suburbs, of course, have their issues, but when you go to the suburbs, you see a lot of order and quiet, and people don't want drama.
Man, I grew up with order and quiet. I could have moved back to Burbank. I could have bought a house in Oak Lawn, Burbank, Justice, Clearing. I could have gone to any Bedford Park. All of those are in the neighborhood. And there's nothing wrong. They're wonderful areas. I mean, and great people. But I did it. I've done that life. I was really happy to live in Chicago and to take advantage of everything. I mean, my kids went to every museum, you name it, they've been there. We've eaten every variety of food. We try all sorts of different cuisines. Ethiopian, let's try it. Peruvian, yes. So yeah, and you have that at your fingertips. Why wouldn't you stay and enjoy that?
Well, I think it's also the school issue because people don't want to have to compete to get their kids into certain schools, or some schools aren't very safe, or they can't pay for private schools. So what about that aspect?
Well, we sent our kids to Catholic schools. So they went to a private preschool. They went to at the Apple School, Lakeshore Teaching and Learning, and that was great. They did really well there. And then my former husband and I, we checked out Latin and Chicago City Day and the Inter-American and the Disney School, which I hated because the principal was with a bullhorn yelling at the kids. And I thought, I do not want my kids yelled at by a giant bullhorn. And we liked Latin. We interviewed at Latin, and we liked Inter-American. They only had like 6 spots open. It was hard. And St. Clement's had 12 spots open. That was it. And my former husband stood out in the cold in order to get in to register. And we got in there and we just loved it. We just thought it was great. So once you got Michael in, it was easy to get David in. And once we got David in, then 5 years later, we got Catherine in. And they had a wonderful education. So I was thrilled. They all went to Ignatius. They all tested in and went to Ignatius.
Wow, that's an excellent school. It's one of the best schools around.
Yes, exactly. Well, they're smart kids. They're good kids. They got to a point. They got too big to sell. That gets to a point you can't slave them out any longer.
Right. So, but also I just find it very interesting because a lot of people, if they can do it, they move out. So they have like the city experience for a little bit. So they grew up in the suburbs. They moved to the city for their city experience, and then they get married and they think, oh my gosh, now we got to get a house in the suburbs and send our kids to safe schools and good schools and have a lawn, etc.
Yeah. No, I get that. You're paying taxes. You want your taxes. You're paying taxes toward the public school system. So you'd like to be able to use it. We pay taxes, and I could not in all good conscience send my kids at that time to the public schools. Now, when Catherine got to be old enough to go to high school, she checked out Walter Payton, Northside Prep. But as a mom, I thought, no, I want them all equal. If you all went to St. Clement's, went to the same grade school, I want you all to go to the same high school. So she tested at Ignatius, and of course she got in. And then the choice was, well, okay, it's your choice. You can go to Ignatius, which is what we would prefer, but it's your choice. Or you can go to Peyton or Northside Prep, or I think they tested into a couple other places. And we wanted small. We didn't want Lane Tech. Lane Tech is a great school, but they were accustomed to small. So we wanted to continue that small. Like they all went to liberal arts colleges, small. And I think they all did well. And I think I made the right choice. So they all went to the same high school.
Well, I'm impressed with people who can make the city work because there is so much here. It's so stimulating. And if you're raised here, I mean, my husband grew up, I've lived in the city for 50 years, and there's so much exposure to so much stuff. And it's not just, it's culture, it's people, it's lifestyles, it's architecture. I mean, it's all around you, especially the north side. But I love the south side, but the north side has so much stuff going on. And so I'm impressed when people can see that.
You go down the south side though, and there's Hyde Park, which is great. And then you can do your Obama tour, and you can eat at Valois or Valois, excuse me. It's not, it's Valois, as my Hyde Park friends have told me. And you can hang out at the Museum of Science and Industry and go to the Oriental Museum, and there's and the Smart Museum down there. So there's wonderful places in Hyde Park. It's the city. And you can go on the west side. You can go to Pilsen. You can hang out in Pilsen and go to the National Hispanic Museum, and I mean it's just great. So National Mexican Museum, and yeah, I mean there's so much to offer here. Again, there's nothing wrong with growing up in the suburbs. I did it, but I think the city is great, and there's so much to offer.
So you think that, what do you think about people being scared? Because, I wrote this letter to the Tribune, they actually published it, about how basically I was saying downtown's not a war zone because I'm outside every day. I live here. I work here. I didn't escape during COVID. Actually, I couldn't escape because I had to work here. Mm-hmm. And the perception that people have of the city is so negative. Why do you think that is?
Oh, it's because of what gets reported. And it is. There is crime. There are carjackings. Yeah. But when I first moved to the city, my watchword, everyone told me, was walk and have your eyes open. You see danger, there's things you can do. And now with cell phones and everything, you're on your cell phone, you're looking at your cell phone. It's no surprise to me that you might get attacked in some way. Again, to me, you have to live as though you're in a major city, because guess what? You're in a major city. And yeah, there is the possibility. There's always been the possibility that something might happen. But I think if you really look at the numbers, it's still minuscule compared to the population. And I think it's worth, you plot it out. I'm going to go to the movies. I'm going to park right there. I'm going to go to the theater. How close is the parking lot? Oh, it's a half a block away. Perfect. Where's this restaurant? Where can I park? Can I take public transportation there? If you don't like, because public trans can be scary, don't take it. Work it into your budget to take an Uber. If an Uber is too expensive, carpool with somebody. I mean, there's stuff that you can do to take a bus. I mean, the buses seem to be okay. You can do it. You can make the city still work.
How do you think the city has changed over the years since you've moved here?
Well, I now routinely clean my purse out, just in case it gets grabbed. So if there's an extraneous set of keys that I don't need, keys to the theater, and I don't need them, I take them out. And so I am more aware of the possibility of, especially as somebody, I have rheumatoid arthritis. I use a cane. So I think I'm an easy target.
Right.
And so I am always careful about that. So far, I've had good luck. I don't shy away from going into certain neighborhoods. I go visit my friends and I park and walk. Um, but I think you have to see the city as it is. It is a major city with a lot of stuff going on. It's no different than, and truly, any other major city. Los Angeles, New York, Boston. You just have to have your eyes open.
Yeah, and while you're talking, somebody texted me, literally Bonnie, and she said, I was just watching your interview. What's her name? It's on in the description. Vicki Quade. I mean, it's on your Zoom.
Vicki Quade.
Oh, Vicki Quade. I'm sorry. Gosh, what did I say?
That's
Quade. Yeah, I'm thinking of Dennis. But yeah. So anyway, Quade.
It is there. I see my name is right there, Vicki Quade.
Yeah, it's on the Zoom, but I guess maybe they're watching a different way.
Here,
so.
wait. Let's see at the bottom of my book. Where's my book? There it is. I'll go. Yeah. There it is. Vicki Quade, right at the bottom. Right
Vicki Quade. Yeah. So I need to Yeah. So anyway, this is Vicki Quade. So, let me just put this.
And Margaret and I met a year ago. I still have the poster. I want to start a reading series at the Greenhouse Theater, and I've been talking.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay.
I've been talking to them, and I said to them, I have a poster already for for two authors, and your husband designed it and put it together. Yeah. I still have it, so let's try to make that work.
Yeah, we should do that.
And then people will have to come to Lincoln Park and see the reading. Sorry, people.
The thing is also, I mean, my issue is that I don't want to go into crowds because I don't want COVID. And so I'm just going to be wearing a mask, bottom line. I mean, of course, if I'm reading, I will not wear a mask. I will take it off. But if I'm near people at a closer distance, I'm wearing a mask. So if anybody out there is anti-mask, sorry, but I want to protect myself and others as well. Because it's not just about protecting ourselves.
Now, have you had your vaccines?
I've had 4.
4, me too. Yeah, did you have COVID?
No. Did you?
I did. I had COVID in December.
Oh, how did you know how you got it?
Yeah, I know totally how I got it. I was working the 3 Christmas bingo shows at the Greenhouse. And then that following Monday, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was at the Greenhouse. Monday, I was out at the Metropolis. 300 sold out people.
Wow.
Doing Christmas bingo. Had a great time. Next day, very next day, little tickle in the throat. And I thought, well, of course your throat is a little sore. You've just done 4 performances, for God's sake, Next day, headache. But I had ordered the wrong humidifier filters. And so it was dry. And I thought, of course you have a headache. It's dry in here, waiting for the new humidifier filters to arrive. But by day 3, I started having a runny nose and I was sneezing. And I thought, okay, look up those symptoms. Sore throat, headache, runny nose, sneezing. And it was immediate that it was Omicron.
Wow.
So, and you could not find a kit. They were not like it is now where you can get them, but you could not find them. They were not anywhere. But a friend of mine was hoarding them, and she gave me a kit, and I took it home, and it immediately was positive.
Wow.
And I was making plans to go to Egypt.
Yeah, but I remember it was I contacted you, and I was talking about doing something. You said, I'm going to go to Egypt.
Yeah, and I had to test negative. So I quarantined and I did everything I was supposed to do, and I took the test and it was still negative. Although my doctor said it was still positive. It could stay positive for a little while. You just have to keep testing. And I was like, all right, fine. So I had to get another box, and I tested myself. And the day before I was scheduled to leave, I went to a place on Grand Avenue. That's
PCR.
It's way east of Michigan Avenue. It's near the AMC 21.
It's in Streeterville. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Near the river,
right? And I went there, and I just thought, okay, I mean, if it's still positive, I'll have to cancel my trip. And it came in negative, and I was like, oh God, thank you.
So you did go to Egypt?
I went to Egypt. I was there for about 2 weeks.
And what were you just traveling there?
My son is on sabbatical, and he was in Jordan, and the round trip airfare to Cairo on Royal Jordanian Airline was $647.
Wow.
And I flew Chicago to Amman, Jordan, and then transferred and went to Cairo and flew. We were in, so I had to test negative to get back to the States. We happened to be in Alexandria on the banks of the Mediterranean, which was wonderful, beautiful. And I found a place that would take me and do the test, and it was negative. So I was able to go home.
That's good.
Otherwise, I'd forced to stay in Egypt.
Oh gosh.
Which I could do for another month. So I loved it. I thought Egypt was fabulous.
What was it like?
Well, Cairo is one of the craziest, busiest, most crowded cities you have ever been in. And I mean, I've been in Beijing, I've been in Shanghai. Cairo was crazy, and nobody wore masks. The whole trip of Egypt, I didn't see very many masks. But
is their rate low there, or
no? It's probably high, but nobody cared. And I thought, well, you know what? I have to test negative to get back, so let's hope. But so much of what we did was outside. We went into the temples, and so we walked. I mean, my son walked my butt off, and we just went everywhere, and a lot of it was outside. So we tried to stay safe. We went to Cairo. We had a driver. We had a personal driver who we hired, and that was really affordable. Meals were nothing. I think at the most US dollars we paid $10, $15 maybe for a fancy meal. The rooms were US money, anywhere from $8 to $25 a night. I mean, really cheap, all throughout Egypt. But we went from Cairo, we went down to Luxor, and we spent time in the Valley of the Kings, and we did all that. And then we went to Aswan, and we went to the wonderful ruins that are there. And then from there we went up to Alexandria and then back to Cairo. So it was great. It was a wonderful trip.
Did it seem safe over there?
1,000%. I didn't feel. In fact, people were so curious. They didn't have a lot of tourists. They were from America. They had German. We saw a lot of German tourists, a lot of European, but when we said we were American, they were really curious about what life was like here, especially during the COVID years, the COVID months, I should say. Although it seems like years, doesn't it? But no, they were very nice, very friendly, and incredibly respectful of me. I mean, to the point that my son, at one point, we went into a museum in Luxor, and it was all flat. And we said, "Do you have a wheelchair? This is such a big museum. It'd be nice if I had a wheelchair." And they immediately ran and got a wheelchair. And this guy who works there pushed me. And my son was like, "No, I'll push her." And he said, "No. She is all mother to all of us."
Wow.
I thought, wow. Yeah. Wow is right. So, and that was not an unusual reaction. Incredibly respectful of women, of older women, of handicapped women. It was great. It really was.
You should write something about that, because it'll help the country, because I'm sure they've lost a lot of tourism.
Well, I don't know. If it stays as cheap as it is, I think they'll gain it back. I actually did post a lot. And then my son David posted a lot. So, but yes, I could write a travel piece.
Yeah, that really helped. So I asked you a question about late night catechism, then we got off on a tangent, sort of. That was a worthwhile tangent, but why did you start writing it? And I know it's blockbusters. You even said in your book, you said that you encountered this guy who said, "Oh yeah, everybody knows about it." This guy was a tourist.
Yeah, that guy, he was great. Yes, the man who came to see the show at the Royal George, and I asked him why he came, and he said, "Everyone knows about when you come to Chicago, you see Late Night Catechism," and I thought that was just great. And I never told him who I was. How did I come to write it? At the time, I was friends with a contractor, a woman named Mary Pat Donovan. She did, you'd hire her if you wanted your bathroom painted or something. And she was an actress in town. and she was a good actress. And she had an idea to do a stand-up comedy routine on the lives of the saints. And she approached me to help her put together stories about the saints. But I found this really not interesting. I mean, just to do a stand-up routine, I mean, but we started talking more and more and more about our Catholic upbringing. And it became really obvious to me that that was the story.
Ooh,
It was connecting
neat.
people to their Catholic upbringing.
And of
And
course, Chicago's perfect for it.
perfect. And one-women shows, one-person shows were very, very popular in Chicago and I think in the country, but clearly in Chicago in those early 1990 years. So this was 1993. And
Wait, sorry to interrupt, but why were those woman shows more popular in the early 90s?
Oh, well, I think there were a lot of them. There were more theater spaces. There were more little basement spaces that had you could fit like 40 people. Those spots are gone. A lot of the buildings were sold, torn down, and brick 3 flats were put up.
Yeah.
Lots of performance spaces are not there any longer. But that's not what it was like then. Also, we call them the good Clinton years. That's when people had money. And so people went out. They enjoyed it. We were part of that storefront theater movement. It was an affordable ticket. It was a good show. It was funny. It was smart. We got great reviews, and it just kept going. It just continued, and by word of mouth, it just kept its pace. But so it was my idea to turn this into a show where there was a nun teaching a catechism class, because I always thought that's what people would connect to, and I was right.
Gosh, that's so you thought, how do you make a hit? I mean, I'm not, this is not like a huge Broadway hit, but to me, it's a hit. Okay. So the fact that it's lasted so long, how do you
Well,
do it?
well, we ran 7 years off Broadway, so we started off Broadway in 96, sorry, because we're in Boston in 95. We went to New York in 96, and it ran for 7 years. And again, it hit on the tourist level. So people coming in would want to see the show. It appeals beyond the Catholic audience. So like we like to say, just like you don't have to be Jewish to like Fiddler on the Roof, you don't have to be Catholic to like Late Night Catechism. It was an inexpensive show to produce. It was a one-character show. For a while, we had a secondary priest character, but once we got the reviews in New York, we realized we really didn't need that secondary character. So we cut that and just brought it down to just the one person on stage. It also has a Chicago improv background. So everybody who's in that show has to have really good improv skills and a knowledge of Catholicism. So all of that, when you look at all of that, all the cities that we were big in, we were like 11 years in Seattle. It was a crazy long time in Seattle. We were in Los Angeles, New Orleans. These are big runs. Boston, we went back to Boston. We went to London, we went to Dublin, we went to Australia, we were in Malaysia. Really big, long runs. You will not find that now. Number one, the theater spaces are not as plentiful. People don't have the money they used to. You can stay home now. You can watch Netflix. You can watch Amazon. You can watch Hulu. You can stream as much as you possibly want. You can watch YouTube, and you don't have to go out and see a show. You're afraid of COVID. I don't want to catch COVID again. And so you will feel more comfortable streaming something or reading a book, which is great. But those days of just people looking for something to do, that's gone.
Wow. So it was gone before COVID.
Oh
You're
yeah.
saying it's Wow. Well, how did you get to those other countries? Did people invite you or did you set it up? And even those other cities?
Both. I mean, we had national producers. I have a whole line of bingo shows. So I've got Bible bingo, Christmas bingo, Easter bunny bingo, Holy Ghost bingo, which is the Halloween show. Um, and even my game show, Are You Smarter Than Your Eighth Grade Nun? I've made enough contacts now that I was in Guam with Bible bingo. I did 3 performances in Guam. And then they brought me back and I did 2 performances, or vice versa. Back in 2018. 2019, I was in Singapore. I think the Archdiocese of Singapore, they must have been reading something and saw that I had been in Guam and they contacted me. The people in Guam heard about me because one of the nuns had been in Virginia and she saw that I had a show in that area and she just tracked me down online. So that is another good thing about online, is that people can find you. So yeah, I mean, it was not that hard for people to find us.
And when you were talking about, how times change, when did that change, when people stopped wanting to go out to all these places?
Well, once there was more available, on TV. So what year was that? I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that. Once you started getting Netflix and people could order movies, first it was movies that they got in the mail, and then it was just streaming online. Once you could do all of that, you didn't have to go out. You didn't have to go to the theater.
But live theater is so different. I mean, because the people who are performing, even a live speaker, if you go to something live, they're responding to the audience.
Right. Even though we're doing this on Zoom, we're connecting. And if this was just something that you filmed and did later, and it was just me talking, a talking head, it wouldn't have that same impact. But it is the economy. It is the fact that, look at 2000. Well, it's really after 9/11. You can count everything after 9/11. 9/11 happened. The country started to shut down. By 2003, you saw a lot of people, a lot of industries affected, hospitality, restaurants. I mean, Navy Pier was dead. I remember taking my daughter out to Navy Pier after school, and we would deliberately try to order just as much food as we could to take home. For at least a month after 9/11, I told my kids, I'm not cooking a single meal. We are ordering at restaurants, just to support as many restaurants as we possibly can.
That's what I started doing during COVID, because I live in an area with a lot of restaurants, and I always took it for granted that they're going to be full. And then COVID hit, and I thought, oh my gosh, let's start going. So we started ordering a few times a week. And I never ordered so much before in my life. And I still do it now out of habit, because I think, well, there are people working at these places and we need to support them.
Exactly right. But you saw the impact on the economy starting in 2003. By 2007, oh my goodness, the housing market was crashing. People were losing their jobs. People didn't have money to just go to theater, buy a ticket, see a comedy. They were worried about being able to pay their mortgage.
Well, yeah, because 2008, 2009, that really changed things. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
So with all these ups and downs, I mean, it sounds like you've had a lot of ups, but how do you deal with the ups and downs that you've experienced?
Well,
you have a very positive attitude.
I do have a positive attitude. You sort of take advantage of the situation. So when people don't have money, they're not giving money to their churches, which means churches need to do fundraisers. So then you hit the churches up for fundraisers and say, we'll come to you. You pay us a certain amount of money, we'll come to you. I can keep my business going. I can pay my actors and stage managers a decent wage by doing that. And then the flip side happens when things are flush and people are given money and churches don't have to do that. Then you say, hey, come to the theater. Come, we have half price tickets, you make it so that you do whatever you can to lure people in back to the theater. And so you just have to keep your eye on what's happening in society at that point.
Well, when did you quit your day job, so to speak? I mean, when you started writing Late Nite Catechism, was that the first production that you wrote?
Oh, it's the first. Well, no, I mean I'd written other things, but that's the first production that was produced. I quit my day job in the year 2000. It was January of 2000 that I left the American Bar Association, and I formed a company that I then produced in the Chicago area. And then Mary Pat and I produced in Los Angeles as well. So we had the two cities going. And then ultimately, it was brought down. And through a lot of different stuff, I ended up creating a different company and producing in Chicago.
Well, what was it like to leave that relatively secure situation and do your own thing?
It was scary. It was really scary. And it was scary for stupid reasons. I thought to myself, well, right now, if I just want to FedEx something, I put it in a FedEx envelope and I give it to our staff person, and she sends it out. Can I do that myself? Yes, you can. You can just go to Kinko's and they will FedEx stuff out. Where do I buy insurance? You call an insurance agency and you'll be able to get insurance. It's all the kind of stuff that frightens you. How am I going to make this work? And you just take the leap. The other thing is, it's not prison. And I've always said this about everything in life. You buy a house. I hate this house. Not prison. Sell it. I just got a new job. I can't stand it. I made a tragic mistake. Guess what? Not prison. Quit. You can find something else. Life is very free flowing, and you don't have to stay with something if you really, really hate it. And that goes with relationships too. Like you have to do what works and what makes you happy and what works for you. And yes, I mean, of course, I have 3 kids. My life was built around them, and so I couldn't be selfish about myself. I certainly had them to deal with, but I could make my life work.
Well, yeah, but see, sometimes people think, okay, they hate their job, but then they can't quit because it's hard to find another job. So,
Is
but
it?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I know what you're saying. It's really the thinking about it, and they can move or something.
There's stuff you can do,
Yeah.
Or a lot of people have that one idea, and they're afraid to create a company to make an idea work. And oftentimes you have to see if it'll work. Like I have a friend who saved enough money. He worked really hard. He saved money for a year, and he decided to become a writer. He was going to write that book, and he ended up writing, but he ended up getting married, and so his life changed. But he had a plan. And then he had a fluid life. He thought, well, I'll finish that book later. But in the meantime, he at least took that leap.
Mm.
And he was happier for it. So, I mean, and if you're miserable about taking that leap, you can always change it. So.
Well, yeah. See, I mean, reading your book and then reading about everything you've done. You've done so much stuff, but you can actually probably write a memoir. But I get this impression that you are, you're a risk taker, and I'm just wondering, have you always been like that, or?
I think so. I went to 3 different high schools. I was taught by Adrian Dominican nuns. I love those nuns. They were great. I loved those years in grade school. I went to one high school as a freshman. It was a Catholic high school taught by Cincinnati Dominicans. I didn't like it that much. I mean, nothing wrong. I just didn't like it. I didn't think I was getting a good education. So I switched over to Revis High School in Burbank. And I loved Revis. And that's when I got involved in theater. At Queen of Peace, I got involved in writing for the local the school newspaper and things like that. But I knew that Revis was not for me. I didn't think anyone tracked much to college. And then I switched over to Jones Commercial. And those were decisions that I made that I wanted to do. I was 15 and I was planning out what my life was going to be. So yeah, am I a risk taker? Kind of. Um, you
Well,
know,
I think also doing creative things is very risky. A lot of
right,
people don't do it.
right. And surrounding yourself with creative people is wonderful. Um, so I've had the luxury of being with really smart, talented, um, crazy, diva-ish, um, difficult sometimes people, but never boring, never boring. So if you're
Yeah.
around boring people, that is your fault.
Yeah. I mean, some people just don't, it doesn't even occur to them what boring is because they just like status quo or they just like the simple life or whatever it is. But
Yeah, that's right. They want to live in the suburbs and raise their kids and get their paycheck and have their health insurance covered. I get that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a safety net and there's a feeling of being able to pay your bills. I mean, I totally get that. But I also get the fact that sometimes you want to break out and you just want to do something that, yeah, it's a little scary, but in the end, you might really like what you're doing.
yeah. And how do you deal with the difficult people that you alluded to?
Bite my tongue. I bite my tongue a lot. I think to myself, that person's having a really miserable life, or there's a reason that person's really horrible. Um, and it's not like I tried to understand why they're horrible. They're just horrible. Um, I just don't think I need to engage them because they're not going to change. And you know this. You've dealt with people. People don't change, not really. Um, you know, they've gotten to where they are for a reason. Um, so I just like, fine, all right, be that way. I'll be over here. I'm gonna go sit down. I'm gonna have a cup of coffee over here, um, and just let them happen.
Yeah, another thing is, about taking risks. Another thing that strikes me is that you seem very successful. I mean, of course, I'm not talking about living in a mansion in LA or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right,
Because some
right.
people think of successful as like driving a Tesla, having the mansion, blah, blah, blah. But do you feel like you're successful or what do you think success is?
Oof. Um, I've had some really great successes. Um, yeah, I think Late Night Catechism is a pretty great success. Um, I think a lot of my other writing is pretty good. I was lucky enough to meet somebody I was with for 10 years. We had 3 amazing children. That's a big success. Um, yeah, I was able to buy a place that I could afford. I live in a great city. Um, I had COVID and got over it in 5 days. Um, I've traveled around the world. Um, I'm very lucky in many regards. I don't take that for granted.
And then how did you, when you did have experience failures, how did you deal with it?
Oh,
Or
I've
any
had
advice, like
failures.
any advice for that kind of thing?
No. I've had failures. I've had shows that didn't work out. My marriage didn't work out. Um, a lot of my business relationships didn't work out. I think you have to take what you can out of those situations and those relationships and work with what works for you. Um, and then just realize that a lot of times, I mean, yeah, the bad stuff is there and you're not, it's just going to be there, but you have to keep walking forward. You really do. And I know that's hard and that seems simplistic, but I think that's the thing is you just have to think that you cannot stand still and wallow. You have to move forward. You have to find a way of moving forward. Um,
Yeah, the reason why I asked that is because it's really from this book, Close Encounters of a Chicago Kind, because I mean, to me, it shows perseverance because you're able to still see a lot in the small things. And even when you had issues with your car, or like, I don't know, or like one time somebody was delivering groceries or you went shopping and they wouldn't let you, they just sort of, oh, I know, you took a taxi and then they just put the groceries on the curb or something, and then you had to take them in yourself, and then somebody came along and helped you, things like that. I mean,
Yeah, no, that's right. My actually, when you talk about the car, one of my favorite encounters was with the very heavy set wheezing taxi driver who picked me up to take me to Midway. And the whole time I thought, this man is going to have a heart attack driving this car. And he kept asking me things like, I think there was a huge lottery that was going to happen. And he said, "Did you win the lottery?" And I said, if I won the lottery, I would not be in this taxi
right.
going to Midway.
Yeah.
And he talked about money. Yeah, that was good. A lot of money, Oprah money. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's right. That's Oprah money.
Yeah.
And he was just in terrible shape. Talking to me, the car is weaving. I thought, oh my God, please let me get to Midway. And I just thought, again, the whole time that was happening, I thought, I'm writing about this. I'm
Yeah.
going to write about this. This
And then
is a good story.
and what kind of advice do you have for people? You mentioned journalism. What kind of advice for people do you have who want to go into journalism and theater with the situation?
Oh, well, very different, two different fields. Journalism, I mean, there are sites. I mean, there people are hiring. And journalism, I think, has ticked up ever since the orange one has left office, and people realized the amount of lies that they were told. And I think the feeling is that the journalists are to be trusted again. So I think there are outlets to look at for jobs. And theater, there's a lot of there's a lot of companies. A lot of people still work their full-time jobs, and they do theater at night or on the weekends. And sometimes you just have to do that if you really love theater, until you get to a point that you can say to yourself, this is more successful, or I've created a company, or I've got a grant. We were able to get some grant money, and we can do something next year that's going to be really interesting. And you sort of evolve that theater experience. It's hard, and it's something, if you really love it, both of those professions, I think you really do owe it to yourself to try to make it work. I mean, I love writing, but I have been writing since I was a small child. There was never a thought that I would do anything else with my life.
Yeah, some people love writing, but they're not really motivated to write because they feel like, what's the point? Nobody's ever going to see this.
Well, and maybe that's true. And so maybe they become great teachers, or really productive nurses or something. They find something else in their lives that is productive, but maybe that doesn't stop them from doing some kind of writing. Not everybody has to be a novelist and be John Grisham and making movies left and right. But writing is wonderful, just to be able to share your thoughts and share them with someone else, and get other people involved in your life. Yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting. Yeah, I think what's interesting is that you were in journalism, and you were sort of at the last days of what it used to be. And then also with theater, because you were saying there are all these independent theaters happening. So it seems like there are two things. Yeah.
And the sisterhood. Little did I know, when I was taught by nuns were in big demand. I mean, that is the truth. The orders were huge. Catholic schools were enormous. It was the baby boom. And that, little did I know that I would be watching the dwindling years of that sisterhood. And it is dwindling. 50 years from now, how many nuns are going to be left? Not many.
Why is it dwindling?
Nobody's going into being a nun. It used to be that, here you were a Wisconsin farm family at 10 kids. 3 of those girls might enter the sisterhood, because they would be educated. Nuns are smart, and they're by and large, the ones that I have known over the last 30 years, and more, because I knew nuns when I was a kid, I really liked. I thought they were really smart, really funny. They supported women at a time when it was hard for women to see a life in in the corporate world, or to see a successful life. Women were telling girls, you can do this. Women were touting that you had a brain. Not You don't have to become a nun. You just have to be your best self. And I heard that from those nuns. And I think a lot of women did. And I think that's why women, not so much the boys. I think the boys got beaten because they deserved it. But I think the girls speak more kindly of the nuns because the nuns supported them.
I had no idea that it was like that. Because you hear about these caricatures, or you hear about certain, not just characters, you hear about certain stories where the nuns beat you, or they're very strict, or it's not fun.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be. I got whacked with a nun's hand, the back of her hand. That happened. I don't think you can deny it. I don't think the nuns can deny it, but it wasn't every nun. But the ruler became the big symbol, and we certainly use it. We use it for comic relief. When you pick that ruler up, oh, you can just see the audience like, there's the ruler. I've talked to a lot of nuns who have said, oh, that ruler bit. I say, well, but you used it. You did whack students with the ruler. And that's why people remember it.
And then when you were growing up, though, what was the situation for women?
Well, my mother worked. My mother was a nurse when I was really little. She worked at the little company Mary Hospital. She was a baby nurse. She worked there for a long time, and then she oddly switched and became a sheriff's deputy.
Wow.
We were like, really? There was a job posting. It was good money. My mother thought, I could do this. She had never fired a gun in her life. And it was no surprise to us when she came home and said she aced that gun test. Yeah, no kidding. But as a baby nurse, what's interesting is she used to sterilize her hands all the time. And when she did that, she literally altered the shape of her fingerprints. So when they did her fingerprints, they looked like the prints of somebody who was 80 years old. And so they had to keep redoing her prints. But she finally said to them, why are you doing this? And she came home and said, guess what? I altered my prints. And she was a sheriff's deputy for a while.
Where?
In Cook County, down at the jail and in the court system. She was a bailiff. And my mother loved, my mother has died. My mother loved true crime. And she was a natural born journalist. When anything was happening in Chicago, my mother would say, get in the car. And we would drive over to witness something, whether it be McCormick Place, the old McCormick Place that was on fire. My mother immediately drove over there so we could see the fire. When the Oak Lawn tornado hit, my mother and I were out on the back porch with my father screaming at us to get inside. She just had a real natural curiosity about life. And that really definitely, and loved to read. She bought books, tons of books. There's always going to the store and buying books and having books around. And travel. My mother loved to travel. So we traveled in the US. She loved music. So we had music in the house. We would go and see performances. I remember seeing Yul Brynner and The King and I. And so, all of that has an impact. All of that, I picked up on a lot of that and just absorbed all of that. But yeah, so then after that, she went into being a secretary for the state of Illinois, and then she went back to being a nurse. And when she died, she was still like a private duty nurse. So she went right back to it.
And was that typical, or what did her friends do? Did they work?
Well, yeah, because she surrounded herself with women she met at work. And my aunts worked. I had 3 aunts on my mom's side, 2 aunts on my mom. There were the three girls, and they all worked. So I was always surrounded by women, personally, who worked. I didn't know anyone who was divorced. I just didn't.
Well, divorce was not as common back then.
Well, but it was. When you talk to people and you find out that they were divorced, their parents were divorced, a lot of people didn't talk about
Oh.
it. But now, if you say to somebody, where'd you grow up? And they say, well, I grew up in Oklahoma and then I spent my summers in here. Like, why did you do that? Well, my parents were divorced.
Okay.
Really? You're like,
Yeah. So what do you think about in the past when people didn't really discuss things openly, like abuse and so forth, and now, or even mental health issues, and now they discuss it more? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's good that people discuss it. I think that that people were way more private. You talked about social media. Everyone's life is out there. If you're on social media, people tend to know what you're doing. Excuse me. But no, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to discuss all that. Why not?
Okay, some people think it's better not to discuss. I mean, I didn't grow up like that. I did not grow up in like a closed situation, but some people who are older, they'll say they don't like how everybody's so open about everything, because then it seems like society is so dysfunctional. Because some people will say, oh, society was more orderly or something.
But it wasn't, was it? It was just hidden.
That's what my dad said. I always asked my dad, he was much older. He was born in the mid-20s. I always asked him about that. And he said,
it was here. I asked my mother about pot when I was a teenager, because my mother grew up in Chicago, and she said, oh, there was pot in high school. She went to school with Geraldine Page, the actress. Russ Ewing, who was the Chicago reporter, was in her class. And it was a very eclectic, very mixed group of students. She went to Englewood High, and she said, "Oh yeah, we called it Mary Jane," and I was like, "Oh, interesting." And she said it was there; everyone knew it. So that whole idea of the pot was really popular in the 60s. Yeah, it was, but it was also popular in the 40s.
But what about public safety? Because people will say Chicago used to be safer, or places used to be safer, and now there's all this crazy stuff going on. I mean, you're older than me, so what do you think?
Well, was Chicago safer? Again, I grew up being told eyes open. Park as close as you can to where you're going. Don't talk to strangers. Well, I didn't follow that. I still talk to strangers. But when you're young, I mean, that's the advice you're given to survive in a major city until you can be old enough to maneuver on your own. But was it safer? I mean, yes. And I think the guns have gotten way out of control. The availability of guns is just horrific. Yes, I think every major city has issues, and that to me can be traced right back to how easy it is to buy a gun in this country, and then in Chicago, how easy it is to shoot somebody and just be put out on probation and do it again. So was it safer years ago? Maybe there were fewer guns. I mean, I think you look at today, and I think there's got to be 10,000 times the amount of guns on the street that there were then.
And then, okay, so we've been talking about, okay, so finally, I should say, what the heck are you doing right now? So I know you're doing the bingo. What are you doing? Are you still doing catechism?
Yes, we do catechism every Saturday at 5:00 at the Greenhouse Theater Center, and in Chicago. So that's every Saturday. And for the month of August, Friday and Saturday at 8 and Sunday at 2, we're doing the quiz show, Are You Smarter Than Your 8th Grade Nun? And those are all at the Greenhouse Theater Center. And when I'm not doing that, I'm marketing. I'm coming up with ideas. I have actually started to develop other ideas. Another thing that I'd like to do is I want to do a podcast, and I want to put all these stories from Close Encounters on that podcast, which I think would be really smart. And then I'd like to, as a possible fundraiser. So XYZ companies look, or church or school or organizations looking for a fundraiser. I'm thinking that I could use some of these stories out of Close Encounters here and weave together like an hour's worth of interesting stories from here
Oh yeah.
On stage. And
Oh, that'd be
I think
good.
that may work. I think that might work. So
No, that'd
that's
be good.
another little project I'm
It's
working on.
just a great book to have for any, like if somebody's waiting for the bus, they can just take
Yeah.
it out. Or if anybody is getting their hair done, and if you get it colored, you have to wait for half an hour. I mean, that's what I did
That's right.
basically. So I read
You
it
know what?
randomly.
We should say it's the publisher for both of us. It's Eckhart's Press.
Yes, Eckhart's Press, right?
It's ECKHARTZ, Eckhart's Press.
Yeah.
People have to look it up, right?
And I'm not just promoting it just because it's the same publisher, but it's really good. I wouldn't,
That's how we met.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
And then, so anything else that you want to promote?
Oh my goodness.
I know you're just doing so much stuff. I can't keep track. Or what's your website?
Well, I don't have a personal website. I guess I should. I should do a Vicki. I own the VickiQuade.com. I should do a personal website. So if anyone knows how to do websites,
Yeah, well, I did it. I mean, you just go do WordPress. You just do WordPress.
I have WordPress, nunsforfun.com, which is NUNS, the number 4, fun, all one word. Nunsforfun.com is my company's website. But you're right, I should have my own personal one.
Well, you can do it. I mean, I did mine, margaretlarkin.com, and I just used WordPress, and it was easy. So
it was easy. I'll look at yours.
Okay. But I'll help you. I'll help you when we're off the air. But anyway, thanks so much for doing this. And it's funny because I usually don't say thanks like officially to people, but that's nice of you to spend all this time, especially because when I met you, I just thought you were a really friendly person, very interesting. Then I read your book and I read all this stuff about you. And yeah, you've done so much stuff that I think a lot of people could learn a lot from you. You should be teaching a class. Have you ever taught anything?
I only taught at Roosevelt. A friend of mine was teaching a master's journalism class, and she had to be gone for a couple of those classes. And she asked me if I would teach them. And that was real eye-opening for me.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
For these master's students who I thought really didn't understand the business at all.
What did they think? What did they think?
I remember so clearly one of the students asking me about editing. If somebody edits your piece, should you take your name off of it? And I said, oh my God, if you did that, your name would never be on any piece. Right. Every piece you've written will be edited. That's what editors do. And she said, I don't ever want any of my pieces edited. I said, you won't be in this business long.
No.
And it was things like that. People would make these kind of wild comments. And I thought, oh man, this is the master's degree program. Holy cow.
Well, maybe it's from fiction, or maybe it's from movies they saw, because they see people getting in arguments like, I'm not going to get it published. Okay. And then they storm away. So they think that's what the business is.
Maybe like Lou Grant.
Right. Something like that. And then, okay. Yeah. I think you should really be a guest speaker somewhere. I know that you do performances, but I mean, we've only talked here.
I would do it. I'd love to do some guest speaking. Perfect.
Okay. Well, let people know, because you'd be good at it. You have a lot of experience. So
I'll have to create that website and I can promote myself.
Yeah, I'll show you how to do it. It's very easy. All right. Well, thanks. I'm going to stop recording now, and then.
Well, thank you. And Margaret, thank